Okay, looks like we are live on YouTube, and I have some time. I thought we'd go over some of what's been going on with Ridglan Farms and get caught up on that. Um, it's been a lot. There's been a lot going on. Um, so let's catch up together on what's been happening, and we'll start here with my buddy Wayne's page. So there's a bunch of posts here. We'll start with this one here. Let me go ahead and get some. How do I get the audio going? I apologize, guys. There we go. There we go. There we go.
Beagles from Ridglan Farms, one of the largest experimentation facilities in the nation. The government admits these dogs have been subjected to felony animal abuse, including intensive confinement, criminal neglect, and even surgical mutilation without anesthesia. But it has refused to rescue the pups. So now we will. Our plan is simple: inspire 100 people to go right through industry security and even police lines to give aid to the pups. We're going to force the government to choose between prosecuting peaceful rescuers or joining us in saving the dogs. But to accomplish this, we need your help.
Okay.
The Wisconsin government charged me with multiple felonies for taking this blind beagle pup from a cage at Ridglan Farms. Now I'm going back, but this time hundreds of people are joining me in risking arrest to save dogs from torture or death. The theory is quite simple: force the system to stop abuse by putting our own freedom on the line. And it's worked for movements in the past. Take women's rights. Susan B. Anthony was charged with a crime for voting in an era where women didn't have the franchise. Civil rights. Rosa Parks was put on trial and even convicted merely for sitting on a whites-only seat on a bus. And gay rights. Dale Jennings refused to plead guilty, went on trial after being charged for merely who he loved. In all these cases, people risked their freedom to defend a moral principle. And in the long run, they won. Now it's time for us to do the same for animal rights. And we have an opportunity unfolding on March 16th. Thousands of beagles are being criminally abused. If you're willing to risk arrest, you can save them and defend the moral principle that animals have rights. The Wisconsin government charged. This is a war on dogs.
Okay, let me pause there. Okay, what's up, Kane? How are you doing? What's up, Brett? What's up, Felix? You guys doing all right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the genesis of the Ridglan Farms story. And I'm already getting that damn glitch, of course. So this will be tricky, but that's okay. Okay, so what was it? 2 years ago, Wayne Shung went on trial for rescuing chickens and organizing mass rescues of chickens. During the course of that trial, and my involvement of it was serving as Wayne's paralegal, because the paralegal that he had planned at the time had a personal tragedy. And so I was asked to stand in and become his paralegal. So we went through that trial. Wayne was ultimately convicted, did some time in prison, got out. When he got out of prison, he asked if I would like to serve as paralegal for the Ridglan trial, which was upcoming. So the background of that is that Wayne and two of his co-defendants at the time had rescued 3 beagles from Ridglan Farms, which is this beagle breeder in Wisconsin. They breed beagles for laboratory usage, animal testing, that sort of thing. And he was facing, I believe at the time, it was 14 years in prison, max 14 years in prison. So we get to the trial. We're all ready to go. The morning that Wayne was set to argue personhood for animals, the charges were dropped. And the reason that the company stated that they dropped charges was that they were getting threats. There was no evidence provided that they were receiving threats of any kind. But what was happening was that activists all around the world were posting about it, talking about it, paying attention to it. It was getting mass media attention, and Ridglan was feeling the heat. So in my opinion, they dropped the charges because they couldn't take the heat. I've told this story before, but, you know, so I was actually asleep when this happened. You know, when someone was awake and found out, and I was awoken to, they dropped charges, you know, so we heard this yelling, and then we still had to like get our suits on and go to court that day. And Wayne gave one of the most passionate speeches, and I've heard Wayne give a lot of passionate speeches now at this point. Wayne just gave such an incredible speech in front of that judge with the prosecutor, the assistant district attorney, I believe she was, sitting across the room with her head in her hands, too ashamed to even face it. The judge, who we suspected was possibly sympathetic to our arguments, was listening very, very intently during that. But, you know, at that point, they were dropping charges, so there was not really much he could do. But Wayne was arguing for the charges to go forward. Okay, so fast forward a little bit. We're still there in Wisconsin. Wayne and his brilliant team of lawyers, who we may see some during this video, devised the idea to ask for a special prosecutor be appointed to look into the crimes that they alleged that Ridglan Farms was committing. Documented, well documented, with whistleblowers and everything. To my surprise, they did appoint that special prosecutor, a guy named Tim Grinke, who spent, I don't know, a year plus, it was a long time, looking into Ridglan Farms. Now, at that point, I didn't really know what was going on. But Wayne popped up later saying he'd been sending all these emails to Tim Grinke and not having them returned. And that basically the government was sitting on its hands. And according to Wayne, later on, it just came out that the government was essentially talking to farming interests and the company itself, but not anyone else. And so what ultimately happened was a win of sorts, which was that the company, to avoid criminal charges, agreed to give up their breeding license. What didn't happen was any decision on what would be done about the Beagles that were still there. Now, according to the Marty Project, which is a group that you guys should be following, they're an anti-animal testing group. They said that as of, let me see, as of January 29th of 2026, and now keep in mind, this all happened like months and months ago, there are still 2,101 Beagles at Ridglan Farms as of January 29th, 2026. And to the best of my knowledge, that's still the case. I mean, I have no idea how many Beagles are still there, but possibly 2,000. Now, Isthmus, which is this local newspaper, I believe based in Madison, Wisconsin, has written about this. And we'll take a look at that. I also want to take us back to this talk given by Wayne and Stefan Seitz, who is the brilliant lawyer who wrote the petition for the special prosecutor with Animal Activism Collective. So maybe we'll take a look at this. But keep in mind that this is 3 months old.
Chime in to the comment section and let us know if you're with any particular grassroots group. Please give yourself a shout out. We'd love to know who's here, who's joining us, and connect with one another always, 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 and what activism you're currently involved in. We are going to dive deeply into the unfolding Ridglan Farm victory today, as we're joined by Stefan from ALLDP and Wayne from the Simple Heart. They are instrumental in this victory. But just a bit about
Man, the
AAC
glitch on my computer is
first.
so bad.
AAC was created to equip activists with the tools, community, and resources they need to boldly participate in our global animal liberation movement. AAC offers a free 3-month mentorship program, free educational live streams and online training,
Skip a little bit ahead.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good to have you both here. Congratulations to both of you, and congratulations to the village of activists that this took. Great news for future dogs and a much needed boost for activists. So I guess I'll pass it to Stefan first. And Stefan, do you want to just give us a little bit of a summary of where we are and what people need to know about this?
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many places to begin, but really it's been a years-long effort. First with activists like Wayne, who conducted open rescue, exposing what was happening at Ridglan,
What's up,
then a
Jake?
criminal trial
What's up, Dara?
of those activists, and then a special prosecutor campaign, essentially asking the state of Wisconsin to intervene and to charge the corporation criminally for just rampant abuse of dogs. And ultimately what this all culminated in, these years of activism, these years of grassroots efforts and pressuring the government, is that Ridglan ultimately agreed in exchange for dropping all of those charges, or rather not even bringing those charges in the first place. They were going to surrender the breeder's license. So they were going to give up breeding dogs for research, which was really the sort of focus of their business. That means thousands of future dogs will not be raised in these horrific conditions and then sold off for really painful experiments. So that's absolutely a huge win. At the same time, there are still thousands of dogs at Ridglan right now, and Ridglan has until July 1st to sell those dogs off. And so we still need to do
Until July 1st to sell those dogs off. Now, I want to point y'all to this. So this is a press release from PETA from March 2nd, which is 6 days ago. March 2nd, feds cite Ridglan Farms as dogs continue to suffer. PETA statement. Please see the following statement from PETA Vice President of Laboratory Oversight and Special Cases, Dr. Alka Channa, friend of the program, Alka, regarding 2 citations issued by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to Ridglan Farms for its entirely absent medical records for the treatment of a suffering dog and for failing to justify the number of dogs used in 4 experiments, both violations of the Animal Welfare Act. There is no bottom to the incompetence at Ridglan Farms. Federal inspectors found that no one maintained medical records for a 6-year-old beagle undergoing treatment for painful cysts and never bothered to justify the number of dogs used in experiments. For decades, this fetid dog factory farmed, bred, and sold thousands of beagles who experimenters poison, mutilate, and kill in tests. Ridglan agreed to surrender its state breeding license by July 1st to avoid charges of criminal cruelty to animals. But these federal reports show that dogs still suffer every second it stays open. Ridglan should not be allowed to operate for another single minute. It must be shut down. And here's those reports right here. From the USDA. Here's another one. You can just pause it if you want to read it. But so what this tells me, is that the dogs are continuing to suffer there, obviously. Let me point to the Isthmus article, and we'll talk about that. So here's this. Activists plan beagle rescue at Ridglan Farms. Protests will include an effort to remove dogs from controversial facility. On Monday, March 16th, hundreds of animal rights activists plan to gather on a country road that runs past Ridglan Farms, a decades-old breeding and research facility in southwestern Dane County. That is where Madison is. To give you some context, they will come wearing white flowers, importuning the authorities for the umpteenth time to take action to shut Ridglan down. And at least some of the protesters, having received mandatory training in nonviolence, will attempt to rescue as many of Ridglan's roughly 2,000 remaining beagles as they can. Our plan is simple, says Wayne Shung in a recent Facebook post about the action. Inspire 100 people to go right through industry, security, and even police lines to give aid to the pups. Shung, an attorney and nationally known animal rights activist, has spent much of the last 10 years seeking to shut down Ridglan Farms, which has in the recent past housed as many as 3,200 purpose-bred beagles. He's been joined in this cause by the local group Stand for Dogs and the Alliance for Animals, as well as the Animal Activists Legal Defense Project at the University of Denver Stern College of Law. Let me link to this so y'all can see it. It'd be so much easier if I didn't have to do it in both. Oh, hang on. It doesn't seem to work, actually. The link is too long, but you guys can find it if you type in isthmus.com. I'll just do that, isthmus.com. There we go. Isthmus.com. Highly recommend you read this article. I mean, we're going to go through it, but there you go. Isthmus. All right. Yeah. So, Animal Activists Legal Defense Project, incredible group of people. That's people like Stefan Seitz, who we just saw on the AAC live stream. Okay, so these efforts have led to the appointment of a special prosecutor who identified potential criminal and civil charges, which were used to leverage an agreement with Ridglan Farms to shut down the largest part of its operation. There has also been state regulatory action, including suspension of the facility's chief veterinarian, but the activists are still seeking the release of Ridglan's remaining dogs, most of whom are now being sold off for use in research. In April 2017, Shung was one of 3 activists who entered Ridglan Farms at night, taking photos and video of row upon row of double-stacked wire cages, some spinning frantically in circles and leaving with 3 dogs. The activists were charged with felony counts that carried a potential maximum sentence of 16 years in prison. But 10 days before their trial was set to begin in March 2024, the charges were dismissed by the Dane County District Attorney's Office at the urging of Ridglan Farms, which said it had received death threats. Again, we never saw any evidence of that. The dismissal prevented the activists from using the trial to call public attention. And by the way, guys, if you receive death threats, wouldn't you make those public? Wouldn't you want the person who sent the threat to be exposed? I'm just saying, if it was me and I was receiving death threats, I probably would expose that. But that's just me. The dismissal prevented the activists from using the trial to call public attention to evidence of Ridglan Farms' violations of state and federal laws governing the treatment of animals. They've been trying to do so through other means since. On March 18th, 2024, the day his criminal trial was supposed to have begun, Shung led a group of activists who delivered a prepared criminal complaint alleging violations of animal cruelty laws at the facility to the office of Dane County District Attorney Ishmael Ozan, asking the DA's office to enforce the law, Shung said. Ozan, I always get this wrong, never did bring charges against Ridglan, so the activists did an end around, petitioning the court to appoint a special prosecutor, as the law allows in cases where DAs fail to act. When the government fails to act, this is the end around that they're talking about. The case was assigned to Dane County Circuit Court Judge Rhonda Lanford, who held an all-day evidentiary hearing on October 23rd, 2024. Witnesses besides Shung included former staff at Ridglan and others alleging the wholesale abuse of dogs at the breeding facility, including painful surgical procedures purportedly performed without anesthesia or post-operation pain relief. So in January 2025, Lanford found probable cause to believe that Ridglan has committed multiple criminal violations of state animal cruelty laws and agreed to appoint a special prosecutor. The task fell to La Crosse County District Attorney Tim Grinke, who last October, after a more than 8-month investigation, so it was 8 months, felt like forever, struck a deal with Ridglan Farms. So he struck a deal with the group that Rhonda Lanford found probable cause to believe that Ridglan has committed multiple criminal violations. Struck a deal so that they didn't have to face criminal charges. The state would not pursue possible criminal charges against Ridglan in exchange for its agreement to relinquish its dog breeding license and sell off its remaining research beagles by July 1st. But the deal allowed Ridglan to keep beagles used for on-site research. Yeah, so like the photo, let me, y'all see the photo on my profile here? Me and the beagle there. I don't know that beagle's specific story, but that photo was taken when activists were gathered around with a bunch of beagles who had been rescued. Probably most of them were from Envigo. I know some of them were from Envigo. Envigo was this place in Virginia that was doing the same thing, breeding dogs for medical research, is my understanding. And they were found to have committed violations. That situation was treated very differently because in that situation, the feds raided the place and took the beagles out. And actually, do I have the book? I don't have Melanie Kaplan's book on hand. It's probably in another room. But she wrote about this. She was there for this incredible historical thing that happened. So while she started writing her book about medical research, she learned that there was going to be this mass, rescuing of the beagles with law enforcement help. And they had all these, humane groups or whatever they are, ready to take the beagles. So I just don't understand why that didn't happen in Ridglan Farms' case and why a company that was found to have committed so many violations, including, as I just pointed out, from January, or what was it? Let me get that right. Well, this report is dated January 29th, 2026 for, let me share this one right here. USDA inspection report. And then here's the other one, same date. January 29, 2026. To be corrected by February 6, 2026. So it's just a very strange story, isn't it? But I mean, it's not that strange when you just understand, how the law typically functions. Okay, so let's see, where were we? Yeah, in its October 28th statement on this settlement, Ridglan Farms said it was entering a new chapter in our mission to improve the health of pets and humans alike. Despite the challenges of the past few months, we are tremendously proud of the outstanding care we provide to our animals, which play a pivotal role in ensuring the safety and effectiveness of cutting-edge veterinary and medical treatments. But Rebecca Robinson, another friend of the program, had her on to talk about this settlement. The founder and president of Dame for Dogs told Isthmus that she and other activists were disappointed that the settlement agreement allows Ridglan Farms to sell off its remaining dogs and continue its on-site research, urging that the dogs instead be put up for adoption. By the way, I want to point out that when I had Rebecca on, I believe there was an ongoing lawsuit that was filed against her personally by Ridglan Farms, which was tossed. Congratulations to Rebecca, but obviously these efforts are ongoing. There is even a legislative effort to deliver this result in the form of a bipartisan bill. AB 436 SB 414, which would require, there's Rebecca, by the way, which would require, and Wayne, animal testing facilities and breeders to put certain dogs and cats up for adoption at least 3 weeks prior to their being euthanized. Though some animal rights activists say the bill's purpose was undercut by amendments, it passed the state assembly and could yet be voted on by the state Senate in its final scheduled floor period, March 17th through the 19th. To my understanding, the people who worked on this, they were glad it passed, but they were disappointed by the amendments, pretty heavily disappointed. On other fronts, the activists have scored some victories. On January 20th of this year, Dane County Judge Jacob B. Frost dismissed a lawsuit brought by Ridglan against Dane for Dogs and others, including Rebecca, alleging that their campaign to persuade dog buyers to stop doing business with the supplier amounted to extortion. Frost ruled that these communications were clearly protected by the First Amendment. Yes. Nice to see something go right. And last September, the State Veterinary Examining Board suspended the license of Ridglan Farms Chief Veterinarian Richard Van Dommelen, alleging multiple ongoing violations. An administrative law judge later upheld the suspension, while Van Dommelen has been barred from practicing veterinary medicine. He continues to work at Ridglan as its facility manager. Sorry, let me catch up if there's any chats. Okay. Ridglan Farms, located in the town of Blue Mounds near Mount Orab, has been in business since 1966. It's the nation's second largest breeder of beagles for use in research. As of the end of January, according to the most recent USDA inspection reports, Ridglan Farms had 1,945 beagles in its breeding operation that are now being sold off, and 156 beagles in the category used for on-site research. The reports faulted Ridglan for its alleged failure to keep records of treatment procedures, as well as its failure to state a reason for the proposed number of animals used. Yeah. Okay, that's the report that I mentioned earlier. Ridglan, through public relations consultant Jim Newman, had previously touted the USDA's failure to flag any violations in recent inspection as proof that the facility was in full compliance with applicable rules. State inspections conducted by the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture have in recent years often led to the identification of multiple deficiencies, including the facility's failure to provide dogs with adequate human contact and socialization, and problems with ventilation and accumulated animal waste. On January 30th of this year, a coalition of activist groups filed a writ of habeas corpus on behalf of the remaining dogs at Ridglan, seeking to force their release to animal rescue operations. A press release from the Animal Activist Legal Defense Project said the lawsuit breaks new ground in the field of animal law. It does sound like, when this settlement was reached with Ridglan Farms, that there were a number of groups that were ready to take the beagles, just from my memory. But I remember a quote saying that the company wasn't going to give up the beagles to animal rights activists. I just I don't know why they're grasping so hard. Like it kind of, they don't seem happy. They don't seem like, they seem just like constantly under siege. Like, I don't know why they don't just hang it up. I don't get it. Give up the dogs, but they are, it just kind of looks like they don't want the L. I mean, it just seems to be all about that. On January 30, oh wait, we read that. On February 6th, Dane County Judge Stephen Elke threw the case out, reportedly after expressing support for the dog's plight. This caused the activists to turn their attention back to plans already underway for a mass dog rescue on March 16th. Ridglan Farms notably has been aware of these plans since at least mid-January, because Wayne's just announced it in mid-January, I suppose, when Newman of the Houston-based firm K. Harvey Brand Partners issued a press release urging state and federal law enforcement to step in, prevent potential mass animal thefts announced by previously convicted activists, meaning Sheng, who has been convicted in prior animal rescue operations. By the way, this is phenomenal reporting. Very thorough. The release quoted Ridglan's attorney. We'll get the name. The release quoted Ridglan's attorney, Eric McLeod, as saying, groups opposed to necessary life-changing and life-saving animal research have repeatedly stated their intent to close our facility and others like it and have all research animals removed. It's deeply disturbing that their response to a legal outcome they do not agree with is to plan actions that, if carried out, could result in serious criminal charges and extensive legal fees for countless defendants, not to mention the safety risks for all involved. An emailed request for comment from Ridglan Farms was fielded by spokesperson Newman, who urged Isthmus not to write about the planned protests in advance, even though he has himself put out press releases about it. As Newman put it, they are clearly planning to do something that's illegal, where people may get hurt, where people may get arrested, where people may face felony charges. And I guess my concern is, as a former journalist myself, is whether it's okay to be writing about and promoting something that could land people in a lot of trouble or get people injured. He notes that Ridglan Farms has razor wire fencing and locked doors. So if these individuals decide they want to go in and take animals, they're going to have to do it by force, which of course would likely be a very dangerous thing. Newman adds that he's very, very fearful about everybody's safety in this case, including that of neighbors who might clash with protesters who arrive in mass. He says Ridglan has reached out to every level of government and every level of law enforcement and asked for assistance, and they appear to be taking it seriously. In a follow-up email that he asked to be attributed to Ridglan Farms instead of me personally, Newman elaborated on this concern, saying in part, "We urge planners to call off this dangerous and clearly illegal action and respect the rule of law and the legal systems in place in our country to ensure fairness and safety." Let me pause for a second. What's up, Jason? How are you doing? Doing all right? Sheng, in an event post on Facebook, asks and answers a series of questions about the planned action. In response to the question, is this action legal? He says it is consistent with the law, which includes the right to rescue animals in distress. But he promptly acknowledges that activists who break the law with this goal in mind will be subject to arrest. He says in a January blog post, "If the prosecutors dare to charge us, we will all demand speedy trial and defend the right to rescue in court." Sheng, despite repeated requests, did not provide additional information about the planned action. It's not entirely clear why Sheng and his fellow activists believe they will actually be able to remove dogs from a facility protected by law enforcement. In 2022, a Beagle breeding operation in Virginia, that would be in Vigo, was shut down due to violations of the 1966 Federal Animal Welfare Act, and its 4,000 dogs were made available for adoption. Sheng and others are hoping to leverage that sort of outcome here, which, why? Why did that happen with Vigo? It didn't happen with Ridglan. One possible way to accomplish this would be for Ridglan Farms to sell its remaining dogs to animal rescue groups, possibly for a higher price than they are getting by selling them to companies for research, about $1,500 per dog. Newman says it's difficult to speak to this since there's been no suggestion like that from the activists. The only things we have heard is either shut them down or we're going to take your animals. Asked about whether the facility's opponents should just try buying its dogs, Sheng, in a mid-February email, demurs, "I think folks are exploring every possible option, but the one I think is most likely to work is just getting out there and rescuing the dogs ourselves." Sheng, in his blog post, went on to say that the coalition being created for this action is just part of a long-term vision to build a fast-acting, cooperative, and whip-smart network of rescuers embedded in universities and faith-based spaces who can be quickly deployed wherever the movement needs us. First, we'll save the animals at Ridglan, Sheng wrote, then we'll save them all. What a beautiful article. Bill Loiters, I'm embarrassed to not know these people's names. But nice job, Bill. Really good, thorough. So anyway, that's where we're at. Schedule them, Brian? Yeah, I just kind of go on the fly. I'm just I'll have some time now, so let's do a live. Similar to I guess my gaming at night and that kind of thing. just do it when I feel like doing it. But they're like stories that I've wanted to look at myself. So yeah, just sort of recapping: 2,101 beagles at Ridglan Farms, according to the Marty Project, as of January 29th, 2026. So there are potentially more than 2,000 dogs still at Ridglan Farms. And the question is, what will happen to them? For, like the groups that are good to be following for stuff about this, the Marty Project, of course, Dane for Dogs, Wayne Chung, of course. Yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens. Let's go back to the talk. And again, for context, though, this came out just right after the agreement between the state and Ridglan was announced. So that was the context for this. But here we have Stephen Seitz, brilliant attorney. Wayne himself, of course, a brilliant attorney and animal rescuer. And Michelle of Animal Activism Collective.
Do everything we can to get those dogs out. And so it is in some ways a big win, but it is only a half win until we can get those dogs out.
Beautiful. Wayne?
Yeah, I mean, it is a bittersweet victory because this is a massive outcome, in many ways an unprecedented outcome, to go from me and some of my friends facing serious prison time, 15 years, to shutting this facility down. But the problem is the dogs are still in cages. And I think this issue is something that everybody should be thinking more about, not just because we care about dogs, and we should care about dogs. Shame on you if you don't. And not just because, I mean, there's 100 million possible animals in laboratory experiments being tortured in ways most of us can't imagine. If you hear about this crazy story involving macaque monkeys in Georgia, I think it was, just getting shot down after this horrible traffic accident, that just shows you how callous and brutal this industry is, that living beings are just mowed down like garbage when they're in a traffic accident. But I think there's a bigger story here, which is about the abuse of power. And I think that what happened at Ridglan Farms, and frankly, what continues to happen at Ridglan Farms, is a very disturbing demonstration of how broken and a corrupt our political system is. And even someone like J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, recently was doing an interview, and he said, you can't trust anyone. You can't trust the system when they abuse an innocent animal. I agree with the vice president on this issue. And what the Ridglan story tells us is that you cannot trust the authorities to act when there are powerful people and corporations on the other side. And the only reason we won was because we had a huge number of very powerful grassroots activists and enterprising lawyers like Stefan pushing up against that power. And it was a decade-long fight. So that fight will continue. But the lesson for all of us is there are some very, very bad things happening behind closed doors when it comes to the abuse of power.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just a window into that, a large window. But so you said, Wayne, that they will likely sell the dogs. Is that
also? I had the privilege to get to meet Julie, the beagle, who we believe is blind, and Julie spends still to this day. Julie was one of the beagles rescued from Ridglan Farms, now lives in a wonderful home where she is loved. And it's really cute because she now spends out of excitement. But of course, it's sad and tragic too, because it's neurologic, it's a complex that she has where she has to spin and always in the same direction. And it's a very kind of bizarre thing to see, and it's just, imagine you're sort of a long beagle and you spinning all the time. So you're having to navigate spinning but yeah, which puts into perspective a little bit. And my recent podcast guest, Matthew, was talking about the individualization of animals, because when we're thinking about these massive problems, we often think about them in terms of scale and numbers, and it can seem so big. And he gave a quote that I used in a clip that was like, you know, one person's death is a tragedy, 10 is a statistic, or a million is a statistic. And yeah, and so with the rescue of a beagle like Julie, you can see up close just the beautiful life that she has now, that she wouldn't have had otherwise if not for the brave actions of Wayne and his fellow rescuers. So,
or it's up in the air right now, and how many dogs are there? What do you predict will happen? I know a lot to do with
the most recent federal inspection report from I think it was December of 2024 indicated there are 24 and change dogs left. We don't know how many are there now, but it's almost certainly in the thousands. And the stipulation that was reached with Ridglan Farms over the last few weeks gives them the right to continue to sell those dogs until July, which is bizarre because the stipulation also indicates there was a clear finding of felony animal cruelty. And say you find a drug gang is involved in some sort of felony criminal conduct. You don't say like, oh, you got to shut down, but we'll give you another 6 months. We'll give you another 7 or 8 months to keep selling drugs and beating people up and murdering people. You say we got to shut this place down now. And this is just one of many examples of how power has distorted the criminal justice process. So part of what Stefan and I and many other activists, Sting for Dogs, the Marty Project, PETA, so many different groups are working on right now is finding every path possible to ensure the dogs that remain at Ridglan Farms are not sold off to experiments, are not continuously tortured in the cages they've been tortured in some cases for 7 or 8 years, but get out into loving homes. And I can't think of a better holiday story than for all these thousands of dogs to get the gift of freedom.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want to keep their image and their heart front and center with us, because when you think about them, when all of us think about them, I want to cry for them. My heart breaks for them. They're still in it, and it sucks, and animals always get the shit end of the stick. So we want to prevent that as much as possible. So Stefan, is there any way you can talk about Richard Van Domelen? He allowed unlicensed staff to perform surgical procedures without anesthesia. Can you comment about that and talk about that?
Yeah, so Rick Van Domelen is the head veterinarian at Ridglan Farms. And so he's essentially the person in charge of the veterinary care for these thousands of dogs in the custody of the company. And as part of his veterinary duties, or as one of the things that he did as the head vet, was that he allowed non-veterinarians, just ordinary employees, to conduct what are called cherry eye surgeries, or really more accurately described as mutilations, where they essentially cut off an infected part of the dog's eye glands without anesthesia, aftercare, blood control, or anything else. It's worth noting that anytime anyone does this, it's felony animal cruelty, it's mutilation, it's absolutely unacceptable. The fact that non-veterinarians were doing it is, another level of concern. And so because of some of the activism on the ground, especially by Dane for Dogs, once this came to light, they essentially submitted a complaint to the Veterinary Examining Board, which is the Wisconsin agency that licenses
a whistleblower. I believe it was, a whistleblower at Ridglan Farms quotes that being there, it was like a bloodbath. And, this was not, this was somebody that was working there.
Veterinarians across the state. And they said, look, this is a clear violation. I mean, it's as plain as day of the veterinary regulations in Wisconsin. And then there was a series of hearings, and ultimately, as of now, his license has been suspended. It's not a permanent suspension yet, but they did have a full day hearing because they appealed the interim suspension. And after a full day hearing in front of an administrative law judge, in which Ridglan called multiple witnesses and put on all of their own evidence, the administrative law judge upheld that suspension. So this is another one of those sort of promising avenues of being able to hold Ridglan accountable, because they do need a veterinarian to be able to sign off. Anytime they transfer dog interstate, for example, they need a veterinarian to be able to sign off on that. And Yeah, this is just another one of those things where when we began this process, we weren't necessarily thinking about the head veterinarian's license. I mean, that hadn't really occurred to me. But the more that this case builds, the more that you were able to get grassroots energy and focus here, and the more these other avenues, these other sort of abuses came to light, and the stronger the case became. So this is another one of the ways that I think that the pressure has been put on Ridglan very successfully.
Yeah, Wayne, do you want to add anything to that about his suspension? Do you think this is putting fear into veterinarians who aren't doing the right thing? And it's also such a terrible representation of veterinarians. I'm sure great, humane, ethical veterinarians are also affected by this.
Yeah, we had some amazing veterinarians who stepped up for us in this court case. Tristan Rosenberg and, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name. What was the other veterinarian's name?
Lowell Wickman, a local
Wickman.
Wisconsin vet.
A local Wisconsin vet, and other vets behind the scenes. One of the most gratifying things to me about this case is that people like Rick Van Damelen, who are using their expertise to not just justify trying to put me in prison, because he is one of the people who's been central in calling us animal rights radicals, actually got a bunch of documents from Freedom of Information Act requests showing Van Damelen reaching out to various government authorities about this case, about me, about the other activists, saying they're terrorists, they're radicals, they're criminals. And for a long time, the authorities just accepted what these so-called experts were saying. But then they kind of looked at the facts and said, wait, you're calling this guy who just took a blind beagle puppy to the vet a terrorist? That seems like a little much. You're saying that it's normal to just mutilate a dog or rip out their vocal cords? And even more disturbing allegations, like Matt Reich, one of the employees, said there was at least one instance where a live beagle puppy was just thrown away into a freezer bag and disposed of, probably just buried alive. And you're saying this is all this normal veterinary practice, totally accepted conduct? That doesn't seem right. And so there's this weird kind of reality distortion that power can inflict on us. And this can happen to all of us. I think we have to really reflect even individually about when this is happening to us, because human beings are highly social animals, and like it or hate it, we're also highly susceptible animals when it comes to power. That when there's a powerful person or powerful system around, this is just how we evolved for 2.5 million years, even going back to Australopithecus and Homo habilis. This is how we survived as a species. When the chieftain told you, run and jump, you ran and jumped.
Which, just to point out something, the reason that Ridglan gave that they dropped charges was because they received death threats. Remember, now, in my opinion, the reason they dropped charges was because there was so much attention. And Wayne's describing people being susceptible to power and influence. Well, I believe that they were susceptible to the power and the influence of the hundreds and hundreds of activists across the world. It was international. The UK, Australia, Canada, wherever. I saw so many posts from people about that trial, and it was everywhere at that time. And I believe that they were susceptible to that, which shows the power of the animal rights movement, especially a unified animal rights movement that works together and focuses on the task at hand. And in this case, when that was going on, it did seem, I mean, there's always things going on all over the world. There's always, different demonstrations and stuff, but the focus really did seem, in my view, and obviously I was close to the situation, so obviously I would see that stuff more, but I was just seeing a lot of really active activists putting the active in activists, whether it was with social media posts or, whatever. And a lot of activists who showed up that were there to take part in the trial and show support for those activists who had gone in and rescued those dogs. So it works both ways. The people who are powerful can persuade people through their power and money and influence. Activists can persuade people through their numbers.
And for a long time, people ran and jumped when people like Victor and Domlin said that abusing animals is totally okay. And this reversal is probably the most dramatic. I've been an animal rights activist for 20 plus years. I've had some victories, had a lot of losses too. This is probably the most dramatic reversal of that narrative that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Where you have all these powerful people. Ismail Zahn wasn't even willing to have a conversation with us, the original DA. And I will say, Tim Grunke hasn't been that much better. I mean, he's been better for sure. He actually investigated the crime. This is a special prosecutor appointed. He was appointed to look into the allegations after everyone realized Ismail Zahn was not doing his job. But more importantly than any particular authority figure, because I think these authority systems always fail, is the fact that so many people took it upon themselves to think for themselves, reflect, observe for themselves, find the information. And I don't mean just vegans and animal rights activists. I mean just ordinary people in places like Wisconsin. I mean people like the reporters in Wisconsin who were relentless about holding power to account throughout this entire process. And they themselves also ultimately figured out that, wait a minute, the things that these authority figures are telling us cannot be true. And that is part of the reason Rick Gandama has lost his license. I am not in jail, and Ridglan Farms has been shut down.
Yeah, right. So, well, I just want to go back to what you said. If I'm a radical extremist, I'm going to fly that flag proudly. And yeah, I'm sure all of us will. But talk about you almost going to jail, Stefan. So after Wayne's case was dismissed, why did you not give up? Instead, you continue to shine a spotlight on Ridglan. Good thing.
Yeah, I mean, Wayne and the other activists, I think, were going to extremely courageously use their case as a platform to shine a light on what was going on inside Ridglan. And when the case was dismissed, they did something that, in my practice as a criminal lawyer, is very unusual. They objected to the dismissal of criminal charges against them. They said, no, please prosecute us. We want our day in court.
I keep saying, I wish that somebody has some video of that speech, but it was so powerful. When Wayne was arguing for the charges against him to not be dropped, which is very funny when you think about it. It's very telling when someone on trial wants those charges, and the the company had, and here's another thing. They dangle these charges over people. That shouldn't be allowed, because I mean, here's one of the reasons why I was in Sonoma County for the first trial that I was deeply involved in the first place, was because my friend Cassie King, who is the leader of the Direct Action Everywhere press team, was at that time facing charges. So I wasn't really going to go to California until Cassie asked me if I would come out there, because she needed help on the press team because she was a defendant. So I go to California, and then we're there already, and then they drop charges on Cassie. And the thing about, well, I'm really grateful, for people like Cassie, and in some ways it's nice to, not be facing those charges, of course, but they've had those charges dangled over them for years in some cases. And so they've had to go through that, deal with procedural nonsense, and, whatever emotional toll it's taking, and also gearing up and ready to speak out for those animals. And of course, in the case of someone like Cassie and Wayne and people like Zoe, they want animals. So they welcome the charges. But I think it's a very kind of sinister, devious kind of ploy that is sometimes employed on people, that they'll dangle the charges possibly with the intention of dropping them eventually. Which in my opinion, there should be some penalty for that.
We want to show what's going on. And basically there was all of this momentum. I think that's why Ridglan wanted the charges dismissed, because they knew that this was going to shine a light on them. And there was all these people that were going to be converging in Madison. And so we had all this energy, and suddenly it felt like the wind was out of our sails, but we wanted to keep that going. We knew what was happening at Ridglan. We wanted the public to pay attention. And so we needed to find a new way of doing that. And that's when we came across this very sort of unusual law in Wisconsin that allows you to request a special prosecutor. Essentially go to a court and say, look, no one is taking action that's supposed to be taking action. We know a crime has occurred. Please appoint a special prosecutor to look into this. And initially we did that partially to sort of keep that momentum going and to be able to air out the horrible things that we knew were happening at Ridglan. But this really was a situation where the case just got stronger and stronger the longer it went on. The more attention we...
Also, just not to make this about me, but I just want to shout out Stefan because I've told this story too, but when I was pulled in as the paralegal, I had no legal background. I was not suited for that position. But there was nobody else at the time, I guess. And so, I was maybe a little in over my head. And there were some late nights, some real late nights of getting documents ready for the trial. I was in charge of handling a lot of the evidence and making sure that was organized and ready for Wayne so that he could defend himself in the best way that he could. And at the very beginning of the trial, Stefan wasn't there. And I remember Wayne talking about, oh, we got this guy, Stefan's coming. He's great. And I remember when I met Stefan, I was just so blown away. And you can see, like, isn't he so, he's great. He's so competent. And the thing that I want to shout him out for is that he was there for, help, like legal support and advice. But he was one of those people who would just like stay up with me late at night and help me when he didn't have to do that. Even if it was like printing things, because, that's a big job when sometimes you're having to print things for, we're talking like multiple page documents for every member of the jury, for everything. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages need to be printed out. So we're talking about reams of paper and long printing sessions. And then, of course, the printer breaks and then you have to deal with that. And it's like, fuck, because we got trial the next day and printer's not working right. And can be kind of chaotic. And so anyway, I really appreciated that from Stefan. It was amazing. And to me, it kind of spoke to his generosity and character that he didn't have to do any of that to make my life a little bit easier. And then, of course, his legal advice during the trial was essential, I think. And, I'm a lay person, so I what do I know? But I know as the course of that trial went, the judge, who seemed to not really like Wayne, kept on removing members of the legal team. And so Wayne, our team kept getting smaller and smaller. And it was very helpful for there to be someone like Stefan, at least on the side, that, could speak with Wayne during breaks or something like that. It was very helpful.
Got the more grassroots energy there was.
Because at one point towards the end, it was just Wayne and me, and with no legal experience, it's not like he was going to get much help from me. He did say that it was sometimes helpful to hear what someone who knew nothing about the law would say about something, because in a way it's like you are trying to reach people who don't have like the concept of legal theory and that sort of thing. So that was kind of an interesting thing. Like, it is actually helpful to have someone with a bit of a, lay person on the team who you can bounce things off of. Sometimes Wayne would like read something to me and just say, can you understand this? Because it's important that everything that I say can be understood. And sometimes during the trial, when there was like sort of like legal minutia going on, Wayne would ask, like, are you understanding what's going on? And the experience on that was that it's kind of like, who would be a good example? Like, well, legal, like lawyers, doctors, economists. There's like a language that they use that kind of makes it inaccessible to the general public. But it's not necessarily very complicated what they're actually talking about. But it sounds very complicated because of the language that they're using all this Latin and stuff. So people are just like, wow, this is like, oh, it's brilliant. What's going on? When they may be just saying something very simple.
Matt Reich, who Wayne mentioned, the former employee who'd seen just really horrific stuff and is still traumatized to this day from what he saw. He came forward. We had not been in touch with him. He heard about this. He wanted closure. He wanted a way to speak up for the dogs that he wasn't able to speak up for while he was there. He courageously came forward. And so it's another one of those instances of the case getting stronger. We found out more info that we didn't even know at the time that we filed the petition. And then by the time we had a hearing where we could put all of this on in front of a court, and for the press and sort of the court of public opinion as well, the case had become so much stronger. And it just became clear that what we thought was happening inside Ridglan was horrific, and the reality was even that much worse.
Were you in the Airbnb when we found out the charges were going to be dismissed? I forget.
No, so I didn't actually fly out. So I was scheduled to fly out. I canceled my flight and spent the next few days just like working on the special prosecutor petition,
right,
just sort of doing legal research all day.
We dragged you into the case and made you lead counsel on it. Yeah, when the charges were dismissed, Stefan is correct. And it was pretty interesting because obviously, I mean, it was in many ways a victory when the charges were dismissed against us. And I just heard Chris Carraway, one of Stefan's colleagues, like literally screaming at the top of his lungs. I woke up at like 6 a.m. and Chris was just going, I couldn't even hear because, I mean, to be clear, Chris doesn't normally talk that way. I just was listening through two doorways, so I couldn't hear exactly what he was saying. I just hear him screaming at the top of his lungs, and I'm wondering if something's broken into the house. Is Chris hurt? Did a dog die or something? And I finally hear him say, they dismissed it. They dismissed it. And I think Chris's initial instinct was, this is good. This is like a victory. But he could quickly tell that for me and Paul and Eva, we were like, we just didn't know how to feel. Because we were, I mean, Eva said this so eloquently. I think she said this in court. Maybe it was after court in an interview. But she said, I've devoted so much of my life and my energy and spirit to these dogs. And the idea that this journey is going to end with the dogs continuing to be tortured and killed, that's not a resolution for me. I mean, you might have dismissed the charges against me, but it feels like there's still something hanging over my head. So we were pretty deflated. I mean, I was genuinely pretty upset. And like, if you had been in the courtroom when we objected to the motion to dismiss, I was pissed. I mean, I was legitimately pissed. But
he was pissed. He was banging on the table like that. Oh God, I had a drink. And when I did that, the drink flew up. That's okay. That's all right. Whatever. He was like, this has to stop, like that. It was a very powerful moment. And like I said, I've seen him give a lot of very moving speeches. He's obviously such an eloquent speaker, such an inspirational speaker, but that was one for the ages for me. That was a really cool moment. I get chills thinking about it sometimes. And it was just interesting to see that juxtaposition of Wayne's fiery passion. And then again, I believe it was the assistant prosecutor, assistant DA, just sitting there really like this, just like this, not even looking up. It was so surreal. And the activists were not allowed to film or record. So yeah, we don't have it, but the judge was very intently watching and listening. It was interesting. Quite an experience. Yeah. He is spooky. Wayne is a boss. What's up, 40? How are you doing? Ridglan is linked or was to the testing facility in Toronto. You know, I've seen a lot of activists who, you know, are extremely active. And I've made that point already that when they drop the charges, which as Wayne's describing is a bit of a loss, but when they dropped the charges, we weren't happy about that. But in a way, it was a win in a way. And the reason that they did that was because of the attention of so many activists. Was the size of the movement showing itself. And, you know, we've had like really powerful moments in the movement lately surrounding trials, like with Zoe. We've had people like you, 40, doing incredible work. And Yeah, and Mel and Steve, like Jeremy will be. You said you'll be live with Mel and Steve a few times this week, and um, I think that Mel and Steve organizing this project live stream where they've gotten a lot of people active, standing out in front of slaughterhouses and filming what's been going on, is a real model um, for what can be done. Jenny McQueen's trial will be May 11th through the 14th. I didn't even know about that. I didn't even know. Jenny McQueen is another amazing Toronto activist. We had her on Wayne's channel, on his podcast. And yeah, just an amazing person. Amazing person, Jenny McQueen. I love how when she was on the podcast, she was just so matter of fact about the incredibly brave things that she has done. And I was just like, wow, she just makes it seem so just like, yeah, that's just what we do. That's just what we do. Yeah. So yeah, I'll have to reach out to Jenny and talk to her about what's going on. But yeah, but the point I was making was with like one of the things I really enjoyed seeing with Project Livestream is one, the number of activists participating, but also the support from around the world for the activists who are doing it. They're getting in the live streams, getting in the chats, you know, posting about it, sharing, resharing, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's been very powerful. So yeah, I want to say like that is not dissimilar to what we saw with those charges being dropped. It was that kind of like coalescing of the movement. So I hope that continues. All right, let me continue with the thing. I have to check two chats. What's up? Some call me Fur. By the way, if I miss some comments, guys, like there's 2 streams, so I have to swap back and forth. So if I miss anything, that's why.
Thankfully, I mean, I credit honestly Stefan's Clinic a lot for this because I don't think this would not have happened if not for the existence of Stefan's Clinic and Justin's, you know, Justin, who's Stefan's boss, a legendary constitutional law professor who decided to devote his career to animals now. His idea to build an animal activist defense clinic many years ago. I don't think we would have had the capacity to sustain that energy because I think one of the things that animal activists don't understand is that we can create these incredible self-sustaining cycles of change. Like our movement has incredible power. There's so much support, but the problem is we can't build up to the point where we have the attentional resources and the other just basic resources to keep that fire burning. It's kind of like starting a fire, right? And it takes some work to get this fire started. And once it's burning, it's like, whoa, it's, you know, almost out of control. It's a little scary how powerful it is. But we can't get to that point because we just don't have the right combination of resources and tools and capacities to get that fire burning. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, you'd have a victory like this dismissal in the Ridglan case from March 2024, and the fire burns out really quickly. And that was what we were scared of. That's why we were concerned, because we thought no one's going to forget about these dogs. We're all going to go home and be happy humans.
I don't know if I'm just going to frustrate you guys right now by sharing a story you probably can't read, but I believe he was just referencing Justin Marceau, and there's a great Vox piece. Well, I'm saying it's great. I love the topic, but I have not been able to read it because it's behind a paywall. But in any case, I'll shout it out, and it's about this topic. It's can dogs be considered persons under the law, the very old law that might just save these beagles, with Justin Marceau there, Angela Fernandez. But as you can see, when I scroll down, and I believe that was a photo of Julie we just saw. Yeah, I should probably get a membership. You know, Vox does amazing work. So if I was going to get a membership to a news source, it would be Vox for sure.
And not realize tens of thousands of dogs will continue to be subjected to these awful experiments indefinitely. And but we found a way to just keep that fire burning. And I think there's a lesson that for all of us, which is I'm not saying be resilient and keep fighting when you're wasting your time. There are definitely times where I've kept plugging along on some campaign that was stupid and wasn't worth my time. And by all means, stop when you're doing stuff that's useless. But we thought this was a compelling narrative. We knew the public was on our side on this. And because we were resilient, even in the face of many obstacles, not just the criminal charges, but having literally tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours of preparation all go down the drain because they dismissed the charges against us. We could have just said, like, damn, I guess we won't get our shot. But we kept fighting. And for that reason, Ridglan has been shut down.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. What a great example of glad but not glad, and the importance, really highlighting the importance of pivoting. Yeah, so important. So, Wayne, I wonder if you could talk about like the footage that you got and footage in general, like the effects of the footage. So I guess, and always forgive my ignorance because I'm not 100% on all of the details, but a jury obviously never saw the footage, so it was more out for the public. Did anybody else of importance see the footage, and undercover and whistleblower footage are so important?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a sore spot for me because this footage has been reviewed by the special prosecutor in this case, and partly based on his alleged review of the footage. I don't know if he's actually even watched a single second of the footage because it certainly doesn't seem like it based on his public response. He concluded there's no evidence of any continuing abuse of the animals at Ridglan Farms, and no evidence that would justify seizing them and giving them the homes they deserve. In contrast, the people have actually seen the footage, whether it's journalists, people in the public, frankly, even people I know in the vivisection industry themselves, right? Because Ridglan Farms is bad even for vivisectors, even compared to MBR in New York or compared to Envigo, was shut down by the federal government. There is no dog vivisection breeding facility that confines dogs in 2.2x4 metal cages their entire lives. It just doesn't happen. Envigo didn't do it. MBR doesn't do it. No one does it other than Ridglan. There are no facilities that I'm aware of. I literally have been an animal rights activist for 20 years. I've never heard of facilities with so much filth and so much urine everywhere that an inspector says they're getting nausea from being there for a few minutes, and their eyes and their nose are still irritated hours later. It's like never existed before. And these are things we documented. We went inside in 2017 through an unlocked door, and we had actually this.
Yes, 40. AAC is a very, very cool org. Michelle's conducting a great interview with these guys too. It's really, really good.
Fancy VR camera. We call it Jelly Squid. I used to not be able to say that because it was a code name we weren't allowed to say. I don't even remember exactly why we weren't allowed to say the code name of the camera. It's just the camera. But I think it's because it was prototype technology. Back when people thought VR was going to be big, turns out VR wasn't very big. No one cares about VR. Back in 2017, everyone thought VR was like the next big thing. Kind of like everyone thinks AI is going to be the next big thing. It's not. Just kidding. It might be. But
you heard it here.
Yeah. No. But anyways, so we spent so much effort and time documenting so meticulously with these extremely sophisticated cameras everything that happened. And the most disturbing thing to me is still, for years, authority figures weren't even willing to look. But if you get a chance, just scroll down my Twitter feed from either the original trial, March 2024, or actually more recently when the charges were announced. I've been posting a lot of videos and photos from Ridglan. It is like impossible for any common sense person with an ounce of empathy towards animals to see Julie spinning in that cage and not feel a little desperate yourself. Because there is something about
London,
intense desperation and fear. I mean,
yes, there is a convergence planned by Animal Activism Collective, to my understanding, for London, and a lot of cool activists in London and the UK. Definitely check that out. Really impactful activism usually takes place at these convergences, and you meet the best people. They often lead to incredible wins, sometimes during the convergences, and yeah, they can be life-changing too.
All of us have had this experience. Like, you see a human or non-human animal in an intense state of fear, not just like a little anxiety, not a little sadness, but like scared shitless, out of their minds, scared and upset and distressed, like desperate. And that is what you sense in the body language of a lot of these dogs. And we know it. We know it when we watch it. And it's not just one clip. I mean, we handed over to the media and to the authorities every second that we shot. In fact, that's one of the reasons they charged me, because I handed footage over about exactly what I did. And there are hundreds and hundreds of dogs distressed like that. And I still cannot fathom, to me, I mean, I really do try to think about, like, Ismail Azan, the DA of Dane County. What is he thinking when he sees this and goes home at night? And maybe he's got a dog himself. He doesn't have a dog, but he has a general sense that dogs are living beings, they're sentient, they feel things. My only explanation for how these prosecutors like Tim Grunke and Ismail Azan can act the way they do is they don't even spend a second imagining what it's like to be one of these dogs. Because if you spend even a second imagining what it's like to live in one of these cages, suddenly your entire life is transformed and you say they need to get out. So I think the video footage was crucial. And I think when Judge Rhonda Lanford, who apparently is a dog lover herself, granted, apparently Tim Grunke, the prosecutor, is also a dog lover and has a beagle and a picture behind him in his office. But I do think Judge Rhonda Lanford, she was editor-in-chief of the University of Wisconsin Law Review, incredibly respected, incredibly intelligent lawyer, did very good legal work. I mean, you could see how meticulous all our opinions are. Even if she ruled against us, I thought it was actually kind of reasonable, to be honest. But I think ultimately part of what motivated her probably was she spent at least a second in the mind of a dog trapped at Ridglan Farms. And I think our legal system needs to have more people like this who have
Thank you, Josie.
empathy.
Appreciate that.
It changes the way.
Yeah, guys, hit like and subscribe. I appreciate that. Josie, and good luck on your homework. Anybody and everybody that's fighting for the rights of animals. Yes. Appreciate that. I'm going to assume you're from Wales, but I don't know if that's your name, but that's cool. Badass. Thank you. Thank you, Josie. By the way, we're not going to watch this entire video, guys, but because I will have to leave in just a little bit, but we will
see the entire system once you have.
We'll go. We'll go another 20 or so.
Start having empathy for its victims.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautifully put. And I really do encourage people to go to Wayne's social media and YouTube channel to see the footage of the dogs spinning. And I do want to talk a little bit more about the symptoms of trauma and anxiety and mental issues in caged dogs, and how cruel confinement is,
electrified,
of course, over anything else.
Yeah. Wayne's sitting right now on a circuit. He's touching. He's got one of those balls. What are those things that make your hair stand? I don't know. Yeah, no, Wayne's an incredible storyteller. Yeah. I'm always amazed because, doing YouTube myself now, I have moments like that. Like I have to gather my thoughts some and take my time and ramble. But Wayne, when he speaks, it all comes out so clearly and precisely. And it pisses me off, frankly, because he's not the guy who spent time on radio. I am. Fuck you, Wayne. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's just he's such a great speaker for the animals. And what's even better is he's obviously very smart, but what's better is where his heart's at, and his refusal to be dissuaded from the goal of animal liberation. He is a I've said it I say it as a compliment that he's a machine. Yeah, he is.
Stefan, I was wondering what advice or cautions would you give activists who want to think about getting footage? Is there anything that they need to watch out for or know in advance?
So I have to be careful not to give legal advice. Obviously, you should go talk to a lawyer. But sort of speaking in general terms, one of the things I would encourage anyone to do who's interested in sort of undercover investigation or investigation of any kind is reach out to us. You can see ALDP on the screen. If you Google us, send me an email. I would love to set up a call. We can talk about any sort of specific issues you have. Depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, we can find local attorneys who will be very well versed in those laws. So that's my sort of first piece of advice is use us. Our goal is to be a resource for the animal rights movement. So please reach out to us, use us. Sort of generally speaking, I echo everything that Wayne said. I think there's nothing as powerful in some ways as footage when you can actually, it's undeniable. And so I think that that's an essential part of the animal rights movement, is continuing to have investigators, whether that's someone who goes undercover, someone who does an open rescue, or a former employee who maybe never thought of themselves as an animal rights activist, but sees horrible things, knows that it's wrong, and wants to expose it. And there are a lot of protections in place for people like that. There's whistleblower protections in many different states. And then also, as we've seen a lot of these cases are not just won in court, but also in the court of public opinion. And oftentimes it's almost like daring the industry. Do they want to take this to trial? Do they want to make this an even bigger platform? And so, I think there's a lot of considerations like that. And the other thing I want to say, just to echo some of Wayne's points, is, I'd seen the footage, dozens of times preparing for the special prosecutor proceeding. I'd click through all of the videos. I was sort of deciding which exhibits were we going to show. But then when I was in court and I had done it, but I'd done it sort of in discrete moments. I hadn't just watched all of them for a full day, the way that we were doing for portions of the testimony. And again, I remember in court being emotional and being like, I have to keep it together. There's no way you can see this and not feel emotional, not feel terrified, not feel that sense of helplessness that all of these dogs feel. It breaks your heart when you watch it. And I think that's
totally. Because, done some of the same thing of preparing the evidence, and you've looked at it a million times. There's something about the enormity of the moment when it's in a trial. And Wayne was on trial for rescuing a goat in a trial that I was just a spectator of. And I remember that the prosecutors, not them, the prosecutors showed the footage that they took of the rescue. And it was, after they had rescued this goat and they were in the car and the goat was bleating, not bleeding, bleating, making that, I guess that's how you say it, right? Making goat. He was being a goat. He was being a goat. And an adorable goat at that, and a sort of tragic, sad goat. And I just remember watching people tearing up in the courtroom, and also the sort of contagiousness of those moments when you see people getting misty-eyed, then you start to feel a little misty-eyed, and just were really powerful moments. But also just knowing that that's, now having the impact. Although, as I'm saying that, one of the frustrations in the Sonoma County trial, where I was in charge of the evidence, was more the frustration that we couldn't show the evidence because we had prepared it all. And then minutes before, the jury would sit down. And sometimes as the jury was sitting down, I was still scrambling to remove the things that the judge and the prosecutor objected to. And I learned something about trials in that day, which was that they get to decide the defense that you bring. You would think that if you are on trial for something, you can make any defense you want, say anything you want, leave it up to the jury. That's not how it works, which makes me very skeptical of the whole process. So if I were ever to sit on a jury, and I thought to myself, wow, that defendant gave such a piss poor defense, now I know that that may have been decided by someone else instead of the defendant themselves, which is dark. It's dark, and it does not tilt the scale in favor of justice.
Also why the special prosecutor proceeding, because Judge Lanford sat there and she saw this, I think it's partially why it moved her. She's an extremely smart judge, and I'm not going to, absolutely sort of as a matter of reason, she reached the right result here. But I think there's no way in which you don't also have, you are not deeply moved. And I think that's often where the law can be an impediment to social change for figures like DAs and just important lawyers and stuff. You get separated from what's actually happening on the ground. You spend too much time thinking about the statutes and which agency is supposed to do this and who's supposed to do that. And it doesn't even have to be bad faith. I just think there's a way in which you almost end up distrusting the sort of emotional and moral part of your soul. And I think there's ways that we have to break through. And I think one of the helpful things about the special prosecutor proceedings that we had an opportunity to break through. We were able to use this powerful footage, we were able to show a judge for hours on end, and there's no denying what she was seeing. And if we had that opportunity with more individuals in power, if they gave themselves the opportunity to feel it and to truly see it the way that Wayne was saying, I think that would make such a difference. And I think a lot of what we have to do is try to figure out how to get out from behind systems like law can sometimes be, that distance ourselves from the emotional, real impact of what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, and also when they were speculating, when Wei was speculating on how people like Ishmael Azan and Tim Grinke can do the things that they do and not take action in the way that we would think like normal people would act, I think it is because they are sort of, I don't know if intentionally, in some cases, and I'm thinking of a specific one, but I think in some cases they're intentionally hiding behind these distancing systems. And then in other cases, they're just victims of them themselves and don't realize it. They don't think beyond their little system. And that gets down to power and money and all those things too, because most people are afraid of powerful people or afraid of systems that are bigger than them. Yeah. And it's a shame because then you see people like activists who are the ones who are courageous. And they're often just like they're very young people in some cases, like in the case of Zoe, who was like 22 years old when she was doing it on trial for rescuing animals. And all these middle-aged people are talking down to her when she's done the courageous thing. And she's holding her head up high. It's so topsy-turvy, isn't it? For lack of a better word.
Jump on this because I think this is such an important point, because it is not just that these feelings and emotions and empathy are important from a moral perspective. They're often very legally relevant because, for example, many animal cruelty statutes define animal cruelty as unnecessary suffering. To determine whether there's unnecessary suffering, you have to have some empathy. And I think one of the problems with prosecutors and government officials across the country is they only think about the suffering of the powerful. It's like Jeffrey Epstein is an example. The entire country's thinking about Jeffrey Epstein. Like, the problem was, for decades, they didn't talk to any of the victims of his crimes. They only talked to the elites who are palling around with Jeffrey Epstein on jets to islands in the Caribbean. They're talking to billionaires who are exploiting victims instead of the victims themselves. And I will say, one of the most disturbing things about this case is even when the special prosecutor decided to investigate this case, you can even see it from his own report.
Glitches.
He apparently spent hours and hours talking to not only Ridglan Farms.
Thank you so much, Spooky. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I see what you say. Yeah. I agree.
Farms, but even other factory farming interests. I was like, kind of puzzled why in his report. It was weird to me because he disclosed this. He said, oh, I talked to the farming interest in La Crosse County about this dog experimentation case in Dane County. So he's talking to all these very powerful people, and he doesn't talk to the witnesses who actually saw the victims being abused. He did not spend a single second talking to the employees who saw dogs being tortured. I did talk to him, mostly because I kept berating him and telling him he needed to talk to me. But even with me, he did not spend a single second talking to me about the things that I saw, the footage that I saw inside Ridglan Farms, about the experience of the dogs that I witnessed. Instead, he was very concerned about the interest of the powerful in that county. And that might seem like, oh, it's just one instance of corruption, but there is a larger pattern we're seeing, not just in America, but around the world, where powerful systems are not doing anything to be responsive to the needs of the vulnerable. That is a fundamental threat to human civilization. That might seem like an exaggeration, but I really think what we're seeing in Ridglan County or in Dane County with Ridglan Farms is a threat to human civilization, because as long as our governments are only responsive to the interests of those who are more powerful, our entire society will collapse because the people will revolt, and rightfully so.
Yeah, thank you for putting it into that broader perspective, and talking a little bit more about the psychological impact on.
By the way, I just linked to this video, so make sure that Animal Activism Collective gets your views and your likes and comments and that sort of stuff,
That confinement has, and
and
relating it to what you're.
and your subscription, of course, as you should also do for my channel by hitting like, subscribe, and jingling those bells as well, because that is an often overlooked aspect of a YouTube channel, is those bells, which notify you when I'm going live.
Saying sort of the fight to have animals declared as sentient. Why are we even having that fight? Of course, we would say, that they suffer and feel pain. And I know you can give Julie as an example, and in this regard, and it's also, as you said, comparable to the dog industry. You've been in there, so yeah. Anything else you want to say to bring the dogs front and center for folks who are just joining us with this?
Sometimes I feel like I'm too surrounded by amazing animal rights activists. So this might be a question for Stefan. What do you think, Stefan? I'm confused how anyone can think that animals are not sentient or not deserving of moral consideration. But apparently there are some people who feel this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I find that hard to imagine. I think everyone knows that animals are. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm also in an echo chamber. I think it's pretty well established that animals are sentient. I think everyone knows this. I think it's why we have laws that prevent cruelty to animals. Whether those laws are enforced, and certainly whether they're enforced against powerful corporations, that's a different question. But I think in theory, I think we all recognize it. I think it's why these open rescues are so powerful, because I think it's when people realize, wait, they're going after the people who courageously went in and took a dog or a chicken or pig who's in desperate need of help and gave them help. And they're going after those people instead of the company that's profiting off of that. I mean, it's sort of mind-boggling. It does remind me, and maybe this is a little bit off topic, but one of the things in D.A. Granke's report that he issued afterwards, where he said, well, I wasn't sure if there was actually enough probable cause about the shelter violations, about whether there was adequate space and whether the flooring was adequate, because we saw it only on a certain, small percentage of dogs that they had these lesions on their paws. And if you have thousands of dogs, inevitably you're going to have dozens, hundreds, or whatever of dogs who have some injuries, and that's just normal given how big the operation is, which I think is wrong as a matter of law, and so obviously wrong as a matter of morality, because it's not like if I do animal cruelty or any other crime on an industrial scale, I get to say, well, it's on an industrial scale, I'm allowed to have. That's not an excuse. That makes it worse. We see this with every factory farm. We saw this in Zoe Rosenberg's case, where they were pointing out how there was chickens being scalded alive. And one of the prosecution's responses was, well, yeah, but it's a very small number of them. But every individual animal, I mean, for that animal, that's their whole existence, their whole life, right? That is their experience of life itself, is this these excruciating moments. And the law itself doesn't say if you torture thousands of animals, then it's okay if there's it doesn't say anything like that. It makes it worse, I think, the fact that you're doing it on an industrial scale, and then even if a small number are suffering, each one of those is an individual victim, an individual experience of life that's excruciating, and that is wrong. And I think it's so easy to get lost in these sort of industrial systems and to use that as a defense when really it isn't.
Scalded alive. Yeah, it just happens sometimes, whatever. It's just a few animals got scalded alive. And by the way, it wasn't a few. But yeah, just a small percentage of animals go to their death by being placed in boiling hot water, which is like the most excruciating pain most people could probably imagine. I mean, they say like being on fire is like one of the most painful things. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah. So anyway, I think those are kind of good words to end this stream on Stefan's. But I would encourage people to watch the rest of this, and we'll see what happens in Wisconsin. We'll see what happens. To sort of recap, there are still about 2,000 Beagles possibly at Ridglan Farms, despite, again, findings, and here they are, from the 29th of January, 2026 The licensee did not keep records of treatment procedures performed for all dogs at the facility. This is after, by the way, all the scrutiny, after the drop charges, after 300 plus violations. This report is dated 29th January 2026. So there's one. There's the other one. Animals did not include some IACUC approved protocols to conduct activities involving animals did not include a rationale for the appropriateness of numbers of animals used. After all the attention and knowing that they're under the microscope and knowing that the media is interested. All right. Well, guys, thanks for joining. I appreciate it. And hit like, hit subscribe. And let's hope good things for those Beagles. Let me make sure I didn't miss any comments before I go. But thanks, guys. Peace. Have a good one. And thank you, Spooky, as always. You rock. 40, you rock. Kane, you rock. Thanks for doing the good work, guys.